The village's dry, shallow brown loam soils clung to my shoes as I walked toward the bus stop, each step heavy with a strange, aching mix of excitement and dread. I could feel the weight of my little suitcase, but it wasn't the clothes or the few books inside. It was the life I was leaving behind. I glanced at my father beside me, his weathered hand gripping mine as tightly as he did when I was a child. In the past, his silence was always steadying. Today, though, it only made my heart beat faster. This was my dream, heading to the University of Nairobi to study education, become a teacher, and change my life. But why did it feel like something was tearing inside me? He finally turned to me at the bus stop, his voice low and rough. "Olivia, no matter where you go, remember, you're stronger than you think. The world outside this village is big. Don't let it swallow you." His words struck something deep within me. I could barely nod, fighting the sting of tears. I was leaving behind everything I knew, my family, my friends, the rhythms of village life that had cradled me for so long. I climbed onto the bus, settling into a worn seat as it hissed and lurched forward. In the rearview mirror, I watched my father grow smaller, the roads of my childhood fading into the dusty horizon. The road ahead was long, Nairobi. I had never been to the city, but after being accepted to the University of Nairobi to study education, this was the beginning of my dream to become a teacher. Behind me, the familiar plains of Nyanza framed my childhood, but a different world awaited ahead. I stepped off the bus in Nairobi with a bag full of clothes, a heart full of dreams, and a brain full of village wisdom. I'd grown up in a small village near Lake Victoria, and I'd never seen a city so big, noisy, and so chaotic. I wanted to study and become a teacher, maybe even the first person in my family to walk the proud halls of higher education. I felt I carried the expectations of a whole village, the pressure. Little did I know that the journey would be more than just classes, exams, and graduation. My life would change forever. The first week was pure culture shock. I remember standing on Moy Avenue with my mouth open, wondering how people lived with the chaos, the loud music from matatus, the fast pace. My first room in the university hostels was cramped, hot, and noisy. Thanks to my roommate's alarm at 5 a.m., I barely slept the first night. But I was too excited to be in Nairobi to complain. I was determined to adjust, even if it meant ignoring the smell of the hostel bathroom and the cockroach that scurried across my bag that first night. Classes were a different world too. The lecturers used big English words and wore smart suits, and I clung to every word, hungry to learn. I made friends fast, bonding over ugali at the mess and our struggle with Nairobi's expensive lifestyle. And when the first long holiday rolled around, I eagerly returned home to the village with stories of the big city, laughing at how my little brother's eyes grew wider every time I mentioned Nairobi. In my second semester, everything changed. That's when I met Eric. I remember the day clearly. It was during a library rush, and I was looking for a spot in the overcrowded reading hall. That's when I saw him, tall, smartly dressed, with that "I'm a third year and I know everything" look. He studied civil engineering and had this quiet confidence that made me feel like the room got warmer. We kept bumping into each other at the library, and soon he was saving me a seat, buying me coffee at the campus cafe, and inviting me for walks in Uhuru Park. Our dates were simple but perfect. We'd stroll through Uhuru Park, watch the boats on the pond, and dream out loud about our futures. He'd tell me about his plans to build roads and skyscrapers, while I'd talk about opening a school in the village. Sometimes we'd split a plate of fries, or if we were feeling fancy, head to a kibanda for nyama choma and soda. It was love pure and simple. I felt like I was living a fairy tale. We faced all the usual challenges students go through, skipping meals when money was tight, studying late into the night for exams, and stressing about the future. But we were happy, and he made me feel like anything was possible. 2 years flew by, and before I knew it, Eric graduated. I was just starting my 3rd year, and the idea of him leaving campus worried me, but we stayed close, and our love grew. He landed a job in Nairobi a year later, and when I finally graduated, we decided to move in together to Zimmerman. Life wasn't perfect. He had this habit of leaving his clothes all over the floor, and sometimes he'd come home a bit too drunk after a night out with his boys. But I brushed it off. He was the love of my life, my future. Then I began to notice things, small things at first. I'd see flirty messages on his phone, girls with names like Shiro Jim or Wendy HR. I'd ask, and he'd laugh it off, saying I was just being paranoid. Friends warned me and told me to be cautious, but love is a powerful blinder. All I saw were green flags. To me, Eric was perfect, and I clung to that image. The red flags kept popping up. I'd find lipstick stains on his shirts, missed calls from unknown numbers, and messages that he'd delete the moment I looked over his shoulder. I knew what was happening, but I convinced myself it was nothing. We had our plans and dreams. I wouldn't let a few messages ruin that. A year after Eric graduated, he landed a higher-paying job. He bought a car and moved us to a better apartment. Meanwhile, I was struggling to find work. The job market in Kenya was brutal, and no school would take me on despite all my applications. Returning to the village felt like defeat. Most friends were married or working in Nairobi, and I felt stuck between two worlds. You know that pressure to keep up, the expectations from the villagers. It was hard staying in the village as an unemployed graduate when everyone except me seemed to be making progress. Eric encouraged me to come to Nairobi full-time while I looked for work, so I did. I stayed with him for months, but job hunting turned into disappointment after disappointment. There were days I would just lie on the bed, never feeling like waking up. I tried volunteering and working at a school without pay, but it quickly became too draining. Eric's job was going well, and he was providing, but the little things we'd once done together began to fade away. He was out more often. Sometimes he'd returned with that familiar smell of perfume that wasn't mine. Little did I know, things would never be rosy again. Thank you for following the story up to this point. Please like and subscribe to this channel. I expected him to be thrilled when I found out I was pregnant. I pictured us becoming a real family, a new chapter in our lives. But instead, his face fell. "I'm not ready for marriage, Olivia," he told me, his voice colder than I'd ever heard. It felt like a slap, and that night I cried myself to sleep, wondering if I'd made a mistake. But I had Liam, a beautiful boy who was the best thing that ever happened to me. The months after Liam was born were some of the hardest in my life. Postpartum depression hit me like a truck, and Eric's support was nowhere to be found. He was distant, always working late, and when he was home, he barely looked at me. His cheating continued, and eventually our relationship crumbled. I packed my bags and took Liam back to the village, hoping for peace. This was the start of the most challenging phase of my life. You see, my parents and family members had high expectations. They knew I would bring success in the form of a successful career. I was broke and a single mother. I had become the example of the village's failure, or so I thought. It was unbearable to realize what my life had come to, but I had Liam. That's all that mattered at this point. Village life was not the same. Former friends were now married. They seemed happy. I saw things differently now. I had the pressure and the desire to succeed burning in me. I wanted to make my father proud. He had sacrificed so much, only for me to return to him with additional responsibilities. It was hard being an adult, but dependent on my parents. I was proud to seek help from Eric, who seemed to have forgotten I existed. Life had become something else. What kept me going was a supportive family. My father insured Liam, and I never lacked anything. My mother ensured I always ate. My siblings would help with the chores. But I was an adult. Being a 25-year-old with a child, yet living at home was tough. Villagers always seemed to gossip behind my back. I would hear, "She went to Nairobi to study, but wasted her life with men." I'd changed, and all my dreams of teaching felt distant. So, when a friend called me with a job offer back in Nairobi, I jumped at the chance. I moved into Kibera, a far cry from my previous life, but at least it was something. I worked, struggled, and sometimes I'd sit alone, missing the life I'd once had. During that challenging year, I met Mike, a fellow teacher. We spent a lot of time together, talking and sharing our struggles. He was kind, but he wasn't looking for anything serious. I didn't realize until it was too late that I was pregnant again. This time, I knew I was on my own. Desperate, I reached out to Eric for help. By now, he'd moved up in his career, living in a beautiful estate and driving a fancy car. He agreed to support Liam, but only under strict conditions. Liam was placed in an international school, and for the first time, I felt I was giving him a real chance at life. I gave birth to Amelia, a beautiful little girl, and even though things were hard, I kept pushing forward. Eric supported Liam's schooling, but he was clear. Amelia was my responsibility. It hurt to send her to a public school while Liam enjoyed the privileges of an international education, but I had no choice. I couldn't bear the idea of treating my children differently, so, with a heavy heart, I decided to pull Liam out and enroll both in a school I could afford. Watching Liam adjust to a new life was heartbreaking. Just when I thought I couldn't keep going, I bumped into an old classmate who worked with an NGO. She offered me a job, and for the first time, I could see a glimmer of hope. With my new salary, I enrolled both children in a good school, giving them the equal chance they deserved. Although I did not work as a teacher, life had improved. At least I could give my children a good life. I could give them equal opportunities for success in life. I could never forgive myself if one turned out better than the other, because I couldn't treat them equally. Through it all, I learned resilience. I'd been broken and hurt, but I'd also built a strength I hadn't known I had. Now, I look at Liam and Amelia with pride, knowing they'll grow up knowing they are loved no matter what. This wasn't the story I'd dreamed of as a girl leaving her village, but it was my story which made it worth telling. Life is never perfect or smooth, but we must keep rising, despite the challenges. After hearing my story, do parts of my journey resonate with challenges in your life? What lessons from my experiences might inspire you to keep moving forward? Please let me know what you think in the comments. Please like and subscribe to this channel.